Everyone who knew Leonard knew him as a fun-loving person. He loved to be with people. But at times, he could be somewhat mischievous. He loved teasing people. But it was nothing malice about it. He only did it to people who he loved. Leonard was also a very skilled craftsman. He could do just about anything with his hands. He could build things, he could repair things, and he could restore almost anything if he put his mind to it. I don't know if he realized it or not, but that was a gift from God. A gift that he not only used for himself, but for many other people as well. It is no telling how many people he has helped over the years with this skill that God has given him. My father was Leonard's oldest brother. He too was very skilled with his hands. But for those who ever knew him or worked with him, they knew he was a very difficult person to work with. And if you was working with him, he was always yelling at you, telling you what you want and doing things right. And if y'all ever worked with him, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And he did this to everybody. But there was one exception, and that was Leonard. He trusted Leonard. And whenever Leonard was working with him, he never bothered Leonard. He always left him alone and let Leonard do what he knew that Leonard knew how to do. I remember one time we were working on repairing the roof. And as usual, my father was yelling at everybody there, and nobody liked to work with him. Some people say it was because he was a perfectionist, and he wanted things done right. But some people said that's not the case. He was just a know-it-all. And I kind of think that myself. But I remember when we was working in the roof, whenever Leonard would get off of work, he would come to help. And whenever his car would pull into the driveway, I remember thinking, thank God Leonard's here. And I would think, maybe if I can go work with Leonard, he'll leave me alone. And that was always the case. So whenever Leonard came, I always wanted to go work with him because I would be left alone. And I hope God forgives me for this. But I never told anybody that secret because I wanted to be Leonard's gopher because I knew I would be left alone. But Leonard, he had a gift with his hands. But everybody who knows him knows he had another gift from God, a much greater gift. It was a gift of a kind and loving heart. He cared for everyone. He loved people, and he loved to be with them, especially with his family. And for those people who weren't family, both him and Betty would more often than not make them feel as though they were family. One of the great saints of the Catholic Church, St. Francis of Assisi, once said, "Always preach the gospel, but only when necessary use words." Probably most people wouldn't necessarily think of Leonard as an overly religious person. But in his own special way, he was. He never preached the gospel with words that I know of. But he did preach the gospel in the way he treated and cared for people. Whenever anybody was in need, both Leonard and Betty were usually the first people who would stand up and help whoever was in need. This was very evident in the way they cared for his sister Margie, looking after her needs, and also with Uncle Walter. If anyone ever found themselves alone, they would not remain thinking that if Betty and Leonard was anywhere near, because they cared and looked after anyone who needed any kind of help. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus was asked, "Which is the greatest commandment?" And he answered them, "To love God with your whole mind and with your heart." Leonard probably didn't know much about theology, but he did know how to love. And he had that love which he carried in his heart. Which is the very heart of the gospel itself. So Leonard did preach the gospel. He just didn't use words. Leonard had the capacity to love greatly. And because of this, people loved him back. But as much as everyone here today loved Leonard, God loved him even more. When Jesus was hanging on the cross, he had Leonard on his mind. He knew his heart and how he cared for people. And he knew Leonard by name, just as he knows each of us by name. And it was because of Leonard and for each of us that he was on that cross, that we might receive redemption and inherit eternal life. Leonard was not created by God in order to spend eternity here on earth. He had something much better in mind. Leonard was created to be united with God and to live along with God and his glory for all eternity. And it is this reason why Leonard and all of us were created, to be united with God. If we truly believe in the promises of Christ and have faith in him, then Leonard is not dead. He has overcome death, and he lives. He lives with God where he was meant to live for all eternity. On Wednesday, shortly after Leonard took his last breath here on earth, he stood before Jesus, just as all of us will do someday. And as he stood before Jesus, I think Jesus probably told him something along the lines of, "Well done, my faithful servant. For what you have done for the least of my brethren, you have done for me. Welcome into my Father's kingdom." At this time, I would like to invite anyone who would like to share their memories of Leonard to come forward.
Anything that I say is going to be repetitious, but I feel like I should say it. I thought about Pal a lot during the last few years, and I've been really sad because I know how much he missed Betty. Pal was really excellent in two categories that I know of. Category number one was being a devoted husband and family man. Nobody ever did that any better than he did. And I was kind of able to view the entire courtship. So I know situations that existed. Like, for example, before they were going steady, Betty had a date with a friend of mine. And when the date was over, my friend walked Betty to the door. And from one of the shrubs in the front yard came a voice that sounded very much like Jerry Brister. And the voice said, "Well, let's give this guy a good whooping." And then another voice from a different shrub that sounded a whole lot like Paw LeBlanc said, "We will if he stays much longer." So my friend, even though he really had enjoyed the date and liked Betty a lot, decided that he'd better be getting out of there pretty quick. And he did. The next thing we knew in the family, Betty and Pal were in fact going steady. And it wasn't long before they were married. Now, the situation was the following. Betty, her people were Protestant, mostly Methodist. They had migrated to Baton Rouge from rural Mississippi. And they weren't too keen on the idea that their princess, that's what she was to the family. She had, in fact, been beauty contest winner, and she was a scholar at Ostroma High School, and she was just a princess. What else can I say? The idea that their princess was being courted by a Catholic Frenchman from South Louisiana caused a few ripples. But there was no stopping it. Betty and Pal were married very soon. And it took Pal hardly any time at all to win everybody over. So he went into this relationship, and the only ally that we know he had was Jerry Brister. Pretty soon, everybody was on Pal's side. And the reason was, first of all, he was very diligent. He was hardworking. He was reliable. But I think the main thing was he appeared to love our princess as much as we did. So, the testimony that he was a great husband and family man is here with us today. The huge LeBlanc clan, all good people, all reliable, steady, hard-working folks. The other area where Pal excelled, without question, was in the area of being an agitator. In the Watson, Brister, Farthing, LeBlanc clan, being an agitator was quite a thing. The old biblical thing about blessed is the peacemaker, our motto was blessed is the agitator. And my daughter did in calligraphy that very saying, and she framed them and gave them to various people, and a copy of Blessed is the Agitator hung in my mother's kitchen for years. Being a good agitator is tricky, because to be a good agitator, you have to you have to do something or say something that makes somebody mad, but not too mad. You want the victim to cool down a little bit and even reach a point where the victim realizes this was really funny. And the victim then laughs at himself, but decides, I'm going to get that guy back. Okay, so if you go through those steps, and you could say who agitated you was very successful in the agitation. I considered myself a pretty fair country agitator, but I wasn't in Pal's league. If they had an Olympics of agitation, I'd be the silver medal winner, and Pal would walk away with the gold. There is just no doubt about it. There are instances, and I won't go through them, but people in the family know about this, instances involving me selling a dining room table where Pal just raked me over the coals. And other instances, the only retaliation that I ever came up with that I was satisfied was when Pal had an incident in Hamburg, Arkansas, buying gas, and the pump stuck, and gas sprayed out all over the concrete there, and Pal paid the guy what he thought was a fair price and left. And the guy said he was going to call the police. So I had my daughter, who did the calligraphy, make up a wanted poster. It said, wanted for gas theft, Betty and Pal had their pictures on it. Please call the Hamburg Police Department. But like I say, he was the champ, and I always said second place is good enough for me. Now, in the next generation of agitators, I've raised a pretty fair agitator, my daughter Stephanie. But recent postings on Facebook tells me that Pal has raised 2 generations of pretty fair agitators. I won't reveal their identities, but they both live in San Francisco. But anyway, you know, there's nothing ever vicious about Pal's agitating. He was the best at it. And I echo the words that were said earlier. I don't think Pal would agitate against somebody unless he cared for them. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
This is the real architect.
I have no idea who Sam was talking about. All right. So funerals have this funny way of bringing people together. And it's such a blessing for all of us to be able to be here today with each other and for Paul. I've heard the saying that goes, sorrow shared is halved, and joy shared is doubled. I feel so fortunate that all of us have come together to help each other hold the sorrow of his passing and to allow the joy that Paul would have wanted to come forth and flourish in this community of family and friends. When I look around around the room here, I can clearly see how many lives Paw has touched. Those of you who knew him are familiar with the sparkle in his eye. I've never seen a twinkle quite like that in anyone else. You probably know too, well, you definitely know because we've been talking about it, about his love and devotion to Betty Lou. A love so deep and strong that he would leave this life to rejoin her in the next one. If there's one lesson that I took away from my grandfather in my life, it's how to love. How to be truly and fully committed to another person. His love for her continues to inspire me, as it does so many of us in this room. Paul was a great model for the importance of family. You guys are a testament to that. He was a proud father and grandfather and the ultimate sports fan, tailgating with family and friends for years at LSU and happily traveling all over the country to watch his grandkids play ball. We could always count on his support, no matter the outcome of the game or how well we played. His pride and devotion to his children and grandchildren were unmatched. And he was an inspiration to countless cousins, nieces, and nephews. One of the first things you would see as you came through the back door at Betty Lou and Paw's house on Park Mount Boulevard was that sign that said, "Blessed is the agitator." And I think Paul really took this saying to heart. His playful spirit gave us all a framework for how to laugh. More importantly, how to laugh at ourselves. And most importantly, how to laugh with the folks we love. We got to witness firsthand the healing power of laughter shared amongst loved ones. I've never known anyone else quite so willing to go so far out of his way to play a prank. One Christmas, after several prior complaints about the loud, squeaky doors on all of the bedrooms in his house, we arrived to find that he had taken them all off the hinges and hidden them, except for the one to his bedroom, of course. Needless to say, no one ever dared to complain to him about the squeaky doors after that. And one of his best pranks that he played on me came when my cousins and I were kids playing up in the game room at their old house. Paw decided that he was going to scare us good. He walked outside, in through his garage, crawled up into the attic space, climbed over the carport, found his way around all the furniture and the boxes and everything to get to the other side of the attic door in the game room. And these doors were always a little spooky to us because they were locked with chain locks, and we were told that we could never, ever open them. So, when he suddenly started rattling and banging on the door from inside the attic, we were scared out of our wits. We hustled down the stairs, tripping over each other 2 or 3 stairs at a time, and stood up in front of Betty Lou like this, shaking. And we said, "We think there might be something in the attic." Of course, she couldn't contain her laughter. She was in on the joke. So she told us, "That's your paw. Y'all go unlock the door and let him out." So I want to ask that you all just take a moment here and think of a time when Paul made you laugh. Maybe he was agitating you. So looking at your faces tells me that you each have really fond memories of this special man. Maybe you feel uplifted a little bit, or a lightness in your heart when you think about the laugh that you share. So as we begin to leave this service and continue to gather today and going into the future in his memory, I'm going to ask that you bring that feeling with you into the moments that you share with each other. Tell the stories that you cherish. Share with each other the joy that Paw shared with you, and double it, time after time after time. Goodbyes are so hard. They often seem to be necessary before we're really ready to say them. Paw never liked to say goodbye much either. When it was time for one of us to leave, he started a game of gotcha last to keep us around just for another minute if he could. So instead of saying goodbye today, I would like to end with one last round of his favorite game. Paw, gotcha last.